let's move to the general first round, the round of 64. There are upsets all the time. That's all we've been talking about practically today, and we're going to continue to do it. A number 15 seed has made the Sweet 16 in each of the last 3 tournaments. We've now seen a 16 seed or beat a 1 seed, and it almost feels shocking. And who calls it? I don't know. It's just a coworker from work who doesn't watch college basketball whatsoever. We're just going to present the question to lead us off here into the bigger, portion of the show where we're talking about upsets. Are there any 16-1, 15-2s that you're looking at?
Not particularly. I'm not the guy to pick big upsets like that personally. I just I'd like to keep my bracket alive as long as possible. So usually I stay away from them. But if there is one to watch out for, I would say Omaha. Omaha is a pretty decent team. They won their conference, and before winning their conference, they started a trend, or every time they win from December 21st on, they've been beating up trash cans, which is a really fun storyline. It made national headlines on X or wherever like social media you're on. A lot of people have seen it where they're beating up trash cans. That not only do the players get in on it and have a lot of fun with it, but assistant coaches do. The head coach is even in on it. So I mean, just a really fun storyline. They score 78 points a game, so they're a high scoring team, a lot of fun to watch out for. And St. John's, in my opinion, is the most vulnerable 2 seed. So if there's going to be a 2 seed or 1 seed to go down, I think it could be St. John's. Obviously, the Godfather and everything that they've brought back to St. John's basketball and New York basketball in general. But I mean, they had a lot of close games in a Big East conference that hasn't been all that good this year. Xavier, who just got into the tournament by beating Texas, but Texas, who's the 14th best team in the SEC this year, took Xavier all the way down the wire, and so did Xavier to St. John's. They took St. John's to overtime in one of the games that they played and kept it close in the second one. I don't know that St. John's is all that good of a team, and I think that if there's going to be any 15-1, 15-2, 16-1 matchup to look out for, losing, like the higher seed losing, I think it could be Omaha against St. John's.
So I've heard that before. I also think there's just a familiarity with some of these teams. We do see them as the 15, the 14, or even the 16 seed year in and year out. I mean, I recognize Wofford. I recognize Bryant. Some other teams that you might see year in and year out, you might be more likely to pick. I'm in the same boat as you. I did this year kind of just fill out those and just was like moving on. I think it's also because the 1 and 2 seeds this year, I feel like are pretty decently strong, or at least the 1 seed. So I'm separating maybe the 16-1 matchups from the 15-2s, but I feel like they're really strong, and a lot of people are projecting them to go further in the tournament. There's a lot of chalk going on, at least at the very top. And that's why I just don't really see an upset. Another really good indicator is how some of these teams have played against some pretty decent competition. And I have the entire list of how each of these teams have played against top 100 opponents, and none of them have gotten a win except for Norfolk State over High Point, who is also a fairly low seed in this tournament. They won that game by 3 points. Outside of that, there are some close matchups that you might see sprinkled in here, but nothing of note that makes me think, yes, this team can make a run. None of these teams have had a very close game against anybody that's rated higher than Minnesota, which was 87th on this ranking. So I'm going to have to side with you. I don't really know if I see a 16-1 or 15-2.
Don't be surprised just in general if St. John's doesn't make it out of the first weekend. That might be a little bit of a hotter take. Obviously, you were talking about the strength of the 1 and 2 seeds this year, but I mean, they'd have to play either Arkansas or Kansas in the second round. Obviously, Kansas has been flailing towards the end of the season, but Arkansas has been pretty solid all season long. Also, St. John's, again, I just mentioned Georgia, and I mentioned the fact that they beat St. John's. Obviously, St. John's on the losing side of that matchup if Georgia won. So Georgia finished as the 11th best team in the SEC, at least record-wise, and I don't know how you want to look at it. They probably weren't within that top 8, top 10 rankings in the SEC no matter what. So St. John's is definitely susceptible to a loss. Obviously, the Georgia loss was a little bit earlier on in the season, but I mean, I could definitely see if there was going to be, out of the 1 and 2 seeds this year, like you mentioned it, they're really strong. If there is going to be a team to knock it out of the first weekend, I think it could be St. John's just in general.
Man, you're low on St. John's. We're going to get to that point a little bit later, too, when we pick some of those underperformers. All right, let's move into the upset lock. We just talked about what upsets wouldn't happen. Let's get to your most confident pick for your underdog this weekend.
I mentioned a little bit early on in the episode, so I'm double dipping here a little bit, but okay. Colorado State, I feel pretty confidently in them. It's also a 12-5 matchup, so it's not like I'm picking it's not like I'm picking like a 7-10 or an 8-9 upset. It's still definitely an upset. I have Colorado State as an upset against Memphis. Again, they're favored in that game. You know me, I'm the one who gives out the picks. I do a little picks here and there. So I mean, I like the fact that they're favored. And again, I mentioned the stat that in 33 of the 39 tournaments, there's been a 12 seed to beat a 5 seed. If you look at the rest of these matchups, we'll get to some of the ones that like we'll get soon to one of the upsets that you shouldn't pick. In the 12-5 matchup, I think that this is probably my most confident one, and probably the most confident one for a big one of the bigger upsets, 7 seed difference.
And as I mentioned, I also have Colorado State winning. I'm going to go with High Point. I just mentioned how they suffered a loss to Norfolk State, and also if taking a look at the rest of that list, they were in some pretty close games against some of those teams that were lower on in the seeding in the tournament. But the more that you really start thinking about some of these upsets, the more that they really don't make sense. And that's what makes March so great. I think that there's a story here. Look, the Panthers are first timers in the NCAA tournament. And they've won 14 straight games. Purdue 3-6 over the last 9, and then obviously there's been a clip going around from from PF from Part of My Take. Excuse me, I almost call them PFT again, but maybe it feels right for them. They have a free ice cream truck to all students. Did you see this? A free steak restaurant where they teach fine dining. And it's like a fine dining learning lab. I think that that's great. And I could totally like wake up by the end of the weekend, or maybe like by the start of the weekend, actually, rather, and just see like a little story on how great their campus looks and how they have free ice cream. And now they're, about to go play whoever in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And it kind of just makes sense. But plus they're hot, and plus Purdue is just kind of cooling off right now.
They're also really easy to root for based off the celebration that they had getting into the tournament. I feel like a lot of people Pat McAfee had to take on this early on in the season. The fact that a lot of people were introduced to High Point, their first time making the tournament, they were introduced to High Point by the fact that they had a huge outburst during essentially their whole stadium was packed out. There was fans everywhere. They were all going crazy. It just meant so much to them to even make the tournament. So really easy to root for. I don't personally have them winning, but if they do, it'd be really great to see.
Yeah, the only issue would be Braden Smith, right, of Purdue, to really just stand in their way if he kind of went off and had a great game and a great three-point shooting performance. But outside of that, yeah, maybe High Point makes sense. It makes sense to me at least. So I have them as a lock. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going for it here. I'm going for it.
You got it. It happens. It's March.
It could make it into this next category. We're talking upset picks to avoid. We've mentioned it throughout this March Madness special now at this point. But what games are you looking at and you're saying everybody's on this, everybody wants this to happen? They're rooting for the underdog, not me.
Michigan against UC San Diego. That's got to be the one that everyone's kind of on. Everyone's looking at the Tridents and they're thinking maybe it can happen. Michigan just won the Big Ten tournament. I don't want to sound so matter of fact here, but I mean, Michigan is a really good team. They came up with a loss against Michigan State to end their season, and then against the rivals, and then bounce back by winning the Big Ten championship. Michigan is also 10-0 in games decided by 10 or less this season. So unless you think that the Tridents are going to blow Michigan out, which I mean, it's March, anything can happen, but they've been in a really good conference. They've in close games. They're practically undefeated. So they are undefeated. So I think that given the fact that they're hot going into the tournament and they're so good in close games, I don't know that the Tridents are going to be able to pull it off. But I know a lot of people are riding high on the Tridents.
Hey, the Tridents. It's a great name.
Mm-hmm.
And they are also making their debut in the NCAA tournament. It's their first year of eligibility. Kind of makes some sense. They take nearly half of their shots from three-point land. They hit 36% of them. Michigan's weakness can sometimes be their shooting woes, just being inconsistent, but they're just too hot. This just doesn't make enough sense. It's on the complete opposite, and I get it. If some of these picks don't make sense, it's understandable. It's March. This one is just a little bit too far out there, and sometimes, we forget that these players hear what we're talking about too. So, like, Michigan is thinking, oh, my God, why are people picking UC San Diego to win this game or anything of the sort? Like, how are they going against us? We just won the tournament. And I think at a certain point, you're going to see a team that's got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder when they really shouldn't have had it in the first place. And they're going to go out there and play the same style of basketball that they just played, later in the week last week. Right. And so I just don't see it. A lot of people are calling it. I also, in the same vein, I have Yale winning in the next round against them. So really, what am I talking about at the same time?
Yeah, another one I just kind of wanted to briefly highlight was Clemson McNeese. I know that a lot of people are high on the fact that their student manager went viral for having the boombox and knowing all the words to the song. But I mean, Clemson is really good this year. They're 18-2 in the ACC. Obviously, the ACC is down this year, but I have Clemson beating Houston in the round in the Sweet 16. So and making the Elite Eight. So I'm riding high on Clemson. I don't know that they'll get knocked off by a McNeese team. I think that they'll just be too much for McNeese to handle.
Doesn't this just show the beauty of March? Because I agree with you in a sense, right? Because I have Clemson going to the Sweet 16, but I have them losing to Gonzaga, who I have beating Houston. And I think that Clemson is going to beat High Point in the round of 32. So we kind of get to the same place, but just in a completely different way.